Well, I did say that this week was going to be revealing news for West Ham United. I guess what many of us didn't expect was that one of those revelations, one of those stories, was going to be the sale of one of the key players at the club. It's happened, and I guess I understand the timing of it, and I'll get into that in a moment. Many supporters kind of knew in the back of their minds that the sale of someone like Matias Fernandez was inevitable, and I guess with West Ham having been offered £85 million from Tottenham Hotspur, I guess it was a deal that was too good to turn down. Now, after all the clubs that were apparently interested in the player, namely Man United, for the second summer in a row, West Ham have sold a player to one of their key rivals. Judging by the response on social media, many fans have kind of accepted this as an inevitability of relegation. But for some fans, there's a degree of upset and a bit of anger, with some suggesting that despite David Sullivan no longer pulling the transfer strings, Daniel Kretinsky seems to be no different. But I wonder how much of that upset is simply because of who we've sold the player to rather than the player being sold. Let's face it, Spurs is a club many West Ham fans simply cannot stand. And the same goes for their fans about us as well. But some supporters are saying Daniel Kretinsky has broken his promise that West Ham, he said West Ham wouldn't have to sell any of their key players. And lo and behold, that's exactly what's happened. Others will argue that the club had no choice given relegation, given our PSR situation, our financial difficulties. And some are fearing that this might be the first domino to fall of many. There's, of course, the rumours around Crescencio Somerville, of course, the stories around Jared Bowen, and maybe one or two others. But you kind of look at this on a balance, and others believe that this one sale has actually secured West Ham's future. So today I want to try and strip away the emotion and look at what this transfer really means to West Ham, because I genuinely believe this isn't just a story about selling Matias Fernandez. It's about where West Ham are heading from this point on. So let's get into it. But before I do, if you're new to the channel or if you've watched the West Ham Voice before but yet to subscribe, that QR code will take you to the subscription page. Subscription is free of charge. If you enjoy the content, click on that, become a subscriber. So before we talk about the footballing side, let's talk about the money, because whether we like it or not, this is why this deal has happened. West Ham have accepted £85 million. After paying Fernandez's former club, Southampton, the 15% sell-on fee, West Ham are going to make, give or take, £37 million, which is PSR profit. And that phrase is quite important, PSR profit. See, the type of profit that matters when the Premier League assesses PSR is this kind of transaction. And the timing couldn't be more significant because this deal was agreed before the PSR accounting deadline. Now, that means the profit lands in the financial year that ended at midnight on the 30th of June, 2026. Now, from here on in, from the 1st of July onwards, we're going to be dealing with squad cost ratio, SCR. But up until the 30th of June, we were still under PSR parameters. Now, considering West Ham's financial position following relegation, it's quite a big thing to have happened. Without this sale, there was a chance that West Ham would have fallen foul of PSR rules. So with this sale, the concern becomes less significant. And until we actually see the accounts published, we're never going to be, we're only going to speculate. But this seems to suggest that PSR concerns have been alleviated, this sale. And this changes almost everything the club decide to do from here on in the transfer window. There's another question I've already seen popping up everywhere. If West Ham have had to pay Southampton 15% of the profit, this sell-on clause, which is roughly £6-7 million, give or take, why didn't West Ham insist on putting a sell-on clause into the agreement with Spurs? Fair question, But I think the answer is actually quite simple. If Tottenham had come in with an offer of, say, 70, 75, maybe even 80 million pounds, West Ham might have said, fine, if you can't meet our valuation, then let's bridge the gap with a future sell-on clause. This happens all the time in football. But the buying club has paid what we've asked for. So that's not what's happened here. They've met the full valuation of 85 million, exactly what we wanted. And once a buying club agrees to pay your full asking price, that's the negotiation over, more or less. It's much harder then to turn around and say, oh, actually, we want another 10 or 15% sell on clause for any future sales. At that point, Spurs would rightly ask, why? If we're paying exactly what you've demanded, why should we give you a share of any future profit? And that's valid. So could West Ham have asked for it? Of course they could. Every club wants to get as much as possible for a player when they sell them. But the valuation has been met and we have to be realistic. And I'll tell you what, £85 million for a player that's been with us for a year is pretty good. So whilst it's frustrating that Southampton will get £6.5, £7 million from this transfer, I don't think it's realistic to have expected West Ham to have secured a sell-on clause with Spurs. And in many ways, the actual sell, the price, reinforces just how strong West Ham's negotiating position has been. We got the figure we wanted and we didn't compromise on the price. So what about Kretinsky? Did he break his word? Well, this is where opinion is a bit split. At the moment, from what I've seen, the majority of fans seem to be on the side of Kretinsky, but there is a number of fans who are upset. Many fans, many supporters believed Kretinsky's growing influence would mean West Ham have finally escaped being a selling club. But wealthy ownership, as other clubs have found out, Newcastle, for example, doesn't mean that we can still keep hold of our biggest stars. Look at Aston Villa, sailing very close to the wind with PSR and always having to sell. They buy big, but they always sell big in order to break even. So has he broken his promise? I'm not convinced he has. There's a huge difference between selling because we're desperate and selling because someone has met the valuation. For weeks, we've heard Kretinsky valued Fernandes at around 85 million. Many laughed. Many thought nobody would ever pay it. Tottenham have. West Ham didn't panic. They didn't have to lower. We didn't have to lower the asking price. They didn't negotiate. We didn't negotiate from a position of weakness. We simply said, if you want him, this is what he'll cost. And Tottenham agreed. It's not a panic sell. It's a club standing firm on its valuation. And I actually think it's an important message to the rest of football. So did we have a choice? Now let's look at the footballing side, because we've been relegated. Matias Fernandez has demonstrated he can perform at Premier League level. Could we have kept him? Well, probably. Should we have? Well, that's a more difficult question. Look, footballers don't usually want to spend their peak development years in the Championship. They've got international ambition, Premier League, European ambitions. All these things become factors. And if a club is willing to pay £85 million, at some point you have to ask whether refusing that offer actually benefits anyone. We're going to have to get used to this because, as I've said, Niels Koppen, if he does come in as the director of player recruitment, Niels Koppen is very good at finding young players at a low cost, build them up, get them into the senior team, and then we sell them at a big profit. So this is, in a way, the shape of things to come. However, it's what we do with the money that's important. And sometimes accepting reality is the smarter decision. But the biggest positive from this sale is that it may stop further sales of more of our key players. Look, I'm not saying it's definite. Crescencio Somerville, I think, could be the next to go. But this transfer actually reduces the chance of losing more key players. So the biggest issue surrounding West Ham has been PSR. The club needed to bring money in, needed some generate money, and a huge amount of it. Now that means that we don't necessarily have to look elsewhere for player sales, but instead of selling Fernandes, we may have had to sold Bowen or other players like that. And maybe the fact that Fernandes, being our biggest asset, being sold, has kind of solved the problem of having to sell other players on as well. Um, Having said all this, I think there's quite a few fans that will look at the squad that we've got. I know I know that there are rumours about us targeting other players, and apparently within the next few days we're going to make a bid for a midfielder, etc. But if you look at the squad that we currently have, you know, have we not got one or two potential replacements for Fernandes already there? Now, I'm sure we'll buy more players, maybe in other positions as well. But there might already be a player who could fill Fernandes's boots pretty well. And that player is Mohamedou Kante. He could find himself now with the opportunity of a lifetime. We paid around £500,000 for this unknown. Since then, he's impressed Nuno, he's impressed the coaches, and he's impressed supporters alike. Reports have even been suggested that clubs are sniffing around, looking to potentially grab him for around 15 to 20 million pounds. And that tells you everything about how highly regarded he is. And there's another interesting point. Kante is actually a year younger than Matias Fernandez. Don't we forget just how young he is. A season in the Championship could be exactly what he needs for development. A chance to play regular football, chance to develop, chance to become one of the first names on the team sheet. And perhaps in 12 months from now, we'll all be talking about Kante in exactly the same way as many fans have been talking about Fernandes. But in addition to Kante, we do have other midfielders that can and should do a decent enough job in the Championship, which begs the question, did we have to actually keep Fernandes? Look, as decent as Fernandes is, £85 million for a player that can go into strengthening the squad to get us back up at first up time of asking seems to have been too good a deal to turn down. Look, there's other players, Edson Alvarez, Thomas Souček, who's already committed himself to West Ham. Kante, I've already mentioned, Freddie Potts, who's had a season in the Championship, so he'll know the demands of it. And there are others, Magassa and several others. So this looks like good business all round. As much as it hurts as to who we sold Fernandes to, the 85 million and the fact that we've got some half decent players already in the squad seems to suggest that keeping Fernandes would not necessarily have been the smartest option. But fans become attached to players. It's understandable. But successful football clubs have to think beyond the emotion. They have to think about building the strongest squad possible, not simply holding on to big names. You don't have to agree to that, but it's a view that should be considered. Now, there's another reason for optimism too. With David Sullivan having stepped back from leading on player recruitment, as many reports have been suggested, then I genuinely have more confidence that the money from the Fernandes sale will be invested into the squad sensibly. It should be on improving the entire squad, not necessarily just Fernandes's role, but now we could look at other areas where we believe need strengthening, and the money that we've got will help to do that. Sometimes replacing one £85 million player with 3 or 4 excellent additions makes the team stronger overall. That, for me, is the real opportunity that this transfer creates. Let's talk briefly about Bowen, because that's the obvious question. Is he next or is Somerville next? I think the sale of Fernandes, weirdly enough, seems to make Bowen more likely to stay. Why? Because the financial pressure has been eased from the club. Bowen, the captain, the face of West Ham, keeping him now sends a huge message. We've sold one player, but we're not going to dismantle this football club. We're rebuilding it. And this is what Kretinsky has promised, that he's not going to try, he wants Nuno to keep as many key players as possible. Same goes for the likes of Somerville. Who knows, now that we've sold Fernandes and the financial pressure is off, do we have to sell Somerville? Do we ask him to stay for a season? He may not want to stay. That's the big difference here. Same applies for Castellanos, all these players, Bowen, Somerville, Castellanos. We can turn around and say, we've got the money in, we're financially secure, let's go out and build a squad around you guys. So, you know, I think it's important what this sale has done. And this, to sell a player in the championship, by the way, now that we're a championship team, this is the biggest sale of a player from a championship club. £85 million. It kind of tells other clubs in the Premier League and in Europe that if any club comes for any of our players, there are going to be no discounts, no bargain prices, and no bargain sales. If you want West Ham's players, you've got to pay what the valuation is. And if you don't get them. Simple as that. But the hard work starts now, really, to be quite honest with you. And as I've just mentioned, the difficult part is making sure that we spend this money wisely. What the fans won't accept is seeing £85 million. And I know not all of it will go towards player purchases, but what the fans don't want to see is all this money disappearing without making the squad stronger. And this is where Kretinsky's vision is really going to be tested. This is where recruitment team have to really deliver. Because if West Ham recruit intelligently, this sale could eventually be remembered as the moment that rebuild has truly begun. So through one sell, we've sorted out our financial issues. We've stayed within PSR parameters. We have a chance to keep other players. And we also have an opportunity to strengthen the squad rather than replacing one individual. Maybe this is the beginning of the rebuild. I guess only time will tell. But the next few weeks could define the football club for years to come. But that's just my opinion. I want to hear yours. Has Daniel Kretinsky done the right thing? Would you have accepted the 85 million, or would you have preferred to keep Fernandes at the club? Did West Ham have a real choice after relegation? The biggest question of all, would you rather have Matias Fernandez in the Championship, or 85 million pounds to rebuild the squad around the players I've just mentioned? If you've enjoyed the channel, if you enjoyed the show, please click the like button, become a subscriber of the channel, hit the bell notification to let you know when I'm next on, and please hit the hype button to be able to promote this video to other viewers on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm sure there's going to be big news coming out, and I'll be on that as soon as it does. I'll see you all pretty soon.